Do you know what a cold open is, Luke?
Yes. SNL has that.
Yeah, well, I realised that we did a cold open, and I've already come up with a cold open for Zootopia.
Yes.
And for this one, I feel like I don't have any plan, so I figure it can just be me talking to you about having a cold open.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that
and
works.
The credits will, the music will go.
Back up, chump, you know Biggie Smalls rips it quick and kicks it quick. You know how black niggas get with the hoods, with keys, with the boots, with trees. Flipping trees, making crazy G's. Hitting buckshots at niggas that open spots on the avenue. Take my loot and I'm bagging. Pippin' hoes that drive Bobos and rodeos. Flash the roll, make a wet in they pantyhose. Damn, a nigga style is unorthodox, grip the clock. When I walk down the crowded block, just in case a nigga wanna act out, I just black out, blow the motherfucking back out. That's a real nigga for you.
Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the weekly movie review podcast where we look at films that have come out relatively recently in the cinema and see whether or not they still hold up upon a second watch. And in the run-up to the Oscars, we are going to be looking at the Oscar winners from last year, and we are starting with Arrival, which won the Oscar for Best Sound Editing and was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Writing Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Production Design, and Best Sound Mixing. So a lot of potential accolades, but it won Best Sound Editing.
Yeah.
I am Michael, and my co-host is Luke. Luke, why don't you tell us a bit about Arrival?
So Arrival came out in November 2016, directed by Denis Villeneuve, stars Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner, Forrest Whitaker, among others. And do you want to have a guess at the budget for the film?
I would think... I don't think I'm that good at this, but I'm going to guess 50 million.
Oh, Michael, you are very close. It's actually a really good guess. It's 47 million.
Oh, wow.
That's a good guess. Although,
I know, yeah. They won't believe that I don't know. But let's see. I'm going to guess something like 300 million box office.
Nah, not that high.
Not that high, okay.
It was around 200 million, 203.4 million to be precise.
I should have gone for 200. It crossed my mind, but then I thought, nah, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. Never do that again.
No.
But yes, not too successful, but successful.
That's pretty good. Yeah, pretty good.
And speaking of success, did you like the film?
How is that speaking of success?
Well, obviously the point of the film was to impress you, so if it has, then it will be successful.
Right, I know, I see. Yes, I did like the film a lot.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, I also like the film.
You probably expect that based on it getting nominated.
Although...
For those awards.
Yes,
actually, haven't said that yet. We didn't like Dunkirk that much.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the nominations coming out possibly at halfway point. So... we always do is we start off with nitpicks, and I've got to say, I mean, one sense in which I like this film is that I did have relatively few nitpicks. I felt like I was almost stooping to CinemaSins levels.
Same here. I had like a couple, but not major nitpicks at all. No. Or major.
Yes. So I have one of my nitpicks that I had going into it was there's a scene where these soldiers, they've presumably listened to this kind of, I guess, Rush Limbaugh kind of guy who is talking about how we need to... Limbaugh.
Yeah.
You sounded like kind of a Bostonian there. It's Limbaugh. They listen to this guy, they decide to basically blow up the aliens or something to that effect. Yeah. And they just let the scientists walk in there, and I'm like, it's pretty crazy that they're going to let them die. It's kind of mean terrorists, I think.
Yeah. They have to be the bad guys, maybe.
Yeah. Speaking of bad guys, actually, I did think it was kind of ironic that in a film that's supposed to be all about understanding difference and kind of how, we're all the same, even if we have different cultures and different ways of thinking and different languages, all of the kind of global enemies of the United States, like China and Russia, were just actively antagonistic.
Yeah. General Chinese bad guy nearly ruined it for everybody, didn't he?
Yeah, I know. They're just terrible people. They're not fit to be global superpowers and world police. I would say America.
So obviously those soldiers were, I guess, manipulated by the Rush Limbaugh type talk show radio host or whatever. And in the beginning of the movies, you know, when the aliens have arrived and Louise, that's Amy Adams' character, is talking to her mother, and on the phone. I don't know if you remember this.
I remember the conversation on the phone.
Yeah.
She says she's fine. So
Well, she just says.
I don't remember specifically.
Don't listen to that channel. They're all idiots. And so.
Yeah.
Wrote, the film is subtweeting Fox News there, because I think Amy Adams would be, she's a liberal, she's a college professor.
Well, she's in Hollywood.
Got me thinking about how different sort of ideologies would perceive this threat. Like, aliens aren't really political, like, obviously, because they don't exist as far as we know. Not a political subject, but I wonder, if there would be a real divide between left-wing people and right-wing people. And in this movie, of course, there kind of is with that talk show host.
Yeah, I think it's. I could definitely see a divide between left-wing people and right-wing people. I want to say that there would be a divide somewhat between stupid people and smart people, but I can almost anticipate turning that into a bit of a jab at what that might extend to. In terms of politics. But yes, I mean, it's definitely, you kind of stereotypically imagine a redneck just, I don't like them, damn aliens.
Just blow them up.
One of the things that I found a bit confusing about the film is that obviously the screenwriter seems to have an active interest in linguistics, because there are a few linguistic facts throughout the film, and I actually looked a few of them up, and I saw a lot of the time the screenwriter had directly encountered a lot of these facts, so I assume he has an active interest in linguistics. But there is one bit that I thought was just inaccurate, where Jeremy Renner's explaining how the heptapod, which is the name for the aliens, how their writing system works, and he says, unlike all human writing systems which convey sound, the alien writing system conveys meaning. And that confused me, because I was 99% sure that at least Chinese, if no other writing system, conveys meaning in that way. So obviously, I guess you probably are not in a position to defend the linguistic claims of this film. But
Eric Heisserer is the man you could potentially have a problem with if he is wrong.
Yeah,
that's who wrote the screenplay.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, I would have thought it's quite well known that Chinese writing system is logographic. So either it's an oversight or it's more complicated than I thought, which is, both equally likely, let's say. Do you have any more nitpicks? Because I think I am done.
I don't have a nitpick. Well, I do, but I just want to point out that Hawkeye and Lois Lane were both in this movie. And obviously, I'm just wondering if every proper movie from now on that gets made, are we going to have somebody from superhero movie who's also acted?
I think what I want to know is, does Hawkeye have a close female associate called Martha? Because I think that could have made the conclusion of the film a lot more exciting. I think it would have been a lot better if the daughter was called Martha.
Yes. The daughter. So the second time of watching it, when she dies of cancer at the beginning. It's not that funny, but I forgot. Oh, is it cancer? I think it is.
I'm sure.
It just says an incurable illness. But I forgot she died of cancer. So I forgot she died. So I was like, oh yeah, shit. That's quite an important thing. I just completely forgot about this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Death is always worth remembering.
I did have one more thing, Michael.
Yes. Yes, I remember actually, because you were in the middle of saying it when the audio cut out.
Yes. So how Lois Lane's character finds out that the aliens have is a bit unrealistic. It's worth to point out that it wouldn't really happen like this, because obviously she's giving a lecture and the student says, hey, can you put on the news? And the news person is talking the alien ship being discovered in Montana in the United States, and then she's saying, hey, guess what, we're getting reports of more alien ships across the world being discovered. But the thing is, obviously, those ships would be discovered first, and of course, it would be massive news if an alien ship just randomly was like in a. I mean, one of the ships, for example, is like on a proper road. Like I think it's in Sudan, and there's one in like a city near Venezuela. So those would be discovered first, and then because obviously Montana is the middle of nowhere. Yeah. So that won't be discovered until maybe like a couple of hours later.
For all we know, aliens landed in Montana a while ago, and we just haven't heard about it because Montana's just so big. Yeah, it was a bit convenient how they happened to be tuning into the news at the exact moment that the newscasters were ready to fill the audience in on precisely what was going on.
Yeah. So that it's a nitpick. It's a small nitpick, I guess, but it's one that I thought, considering how this film likes to be realistic, which we'll get onto later. Yeah, I think they could have done that better.
But I think that's really one of the only major nitpicks. Although you have a active interest in talking about this one particular character, and I have two relevant.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I say it's more than nitpicks. I got three things on him. The Colonel Weber, okay. I believe he's called.
I wonder how you and I are. That's Forrest Whitaker, right?
Forrest Whitaker, yeah. I'm just checking his name is, Colonel G.T. Weber with one B. And Colonel G.T. Weber does some things which can only be described as strange. So, firstly, when he first meets Amy Adams, he says she's top of the list in terms of linguistic experts that they want to help, but he gives up after 2 minutes of talking to her and just leaves and goes all the way to Berkeley and at California. I don't know where she's based.
I've got something relevant to that actually. Because,
okay, go on.
Because one of the things he does, and I noticed this, it's actually my first nitpick I wrote down. He plays an audio file of a alien language that doesn't even sound like words and says, "So what do you make of that?"
Yeah.
And I just think she's a linguist, not a mind reader.
I know, but I'll give them a small pass on that because the guy isn't that educated, and he's just well, this is the best linguist in the world. Might as well do it.
Yeah. That means she knows every language, even languages no one's heard before.
Yeah, I know.
But obviously the thing is, she says, of course, well, I need to go and interact with them.
Yeah.
And then he responds by saying, I'm not going to let you do that, basically. He says, I don't want it to become a tourist attraction. You think, what do you think? I mean, it's fine.
She's the most important person. If you're going to give it a pass to the site to anybody, it's going to be her, and obviously Jeremy Renner. So I don't know why he was so against it. He should have been okay, you can't tell? Well, let's bring you there. You're the person we want the most.
Yes.
Okay. And then the another point about the Colonel, he questions her and her methods, even though again she's an expert on linguistics and the best in the world or whatever. And if I was him, I'd be okay, you know what you're doing. I'm just going to leave you to it. I was just going to point out, she gives the example about kangaroos and Aborigines.
Oh, I've got something to say about that.
Okay, go
on. So I actually heard, and this is a theory on Wikipedia, which I checked afterwards, the exact same story about in Mexico. There's a place called the Yucatan Peninsula.
Yes.
Do you know Horrible Histories?
Yeah.
Okay, so I used to read the Horrible Histories books, and one of the ones on the Aztecs, I think it was the Awesome Aztecs, but maybe I'm lying about that. It had a story, and it said, the Yucatan Peninsula is called that because the Mayan people there, when asked what the place was called, they said Yucatan, which is Mayan for I don't understand. And that is, or was, a theory about where the name came from. It's one of the less plausible theories, but it kind of, when she brought up, obviously, because in the example it's kangaroos, and kangaroo means I don't understand, except, of course, by her own admission, it doesn't.
After she says that, the Colonel berates her, or says, remember what happened to the Aborigines? They almost got wiped out. And I was like, what's she meant to do with that piece of information? And she got, okay, well, thanks for that. I'm aware. should I stop doing what I'm doing then? Like, it's just a bit stupid. But yeah.
Yes, I actually had something else. That was my only other nitpick, was when he says, I found this quite funny. Basically, he says, "Oh, I don't want to question your methods, but he's surely teaching them to speak and write and read is going to take longer." And then she just says, "You're wrong. It's faster." And it's kind of like, in a way, he almost gives up too easy. She just says, "Nope, it's going to be faster." And he's like, "Okay." And then they have a whole kangaroo conversation, which I thought was, a bit funny. That it's kind of like he seems to almost be a half-hearted cynic, because half the time he's like, "Oh, I don't believe, this language thing isn't working, blah blah blah." But then he also seems to be not that invested in it.
Yeah, so in these type of movies, I think the hardline Colonel kind of works, well, as kind of an antagonistic character. But obviously in this movie they didn't want to go down that road of making it too cliche. So they gave him a bit of, antagonistic qualities. They made him a bit, pushy, but other times they laid off because they didn't, obviously want it to seem too over the top. And I think I think if this was happening in real life, the Colonel would completely and utterly listen to the experts. I think it just makes the movie more interesting if he's a bit combative. And also, one more thing about Colonel Weather. When Louise, obviously, she goes into the spaceship again right at the end of the movie, and she's telling him her breakthrough discovery. And like, the language allows you to see the future if you understand it. That's the gift. And it's like this amazing thing that she's discovered, and he just says, "Well, we tried, let's just give up, let's just go home." And like Louisa just told her the whole point of why they're there, or why she's there. Like, she's finally got the answer. And instead of being like, "Do you know what? Actually, that's very interesting. I'll tell my superiors," or whatever, that we figured it out. He's just like, "Yeah, let's just go home." Yeah.
Cool. That's it. He just doesn't care.
Yeah, he just doesn't care.
That seems to be his character motivation.
Yeah.
I was considering the characters a bit more. Obviously, there aren't too many characters in this, I guess. I mean, there's, I guess, a soldier who gets a bit of characterization in that he listens to Rush Limbaugh and decides to become a terrorist. So that's some character. And then obviously there's the guy who, and I've already forgotten his name, and I heard it's the guy who plays kind of I guess he's a CIA official, is what he's implied to.
Yes.
He's
I don't know his name either.
Serious man.
Is it Agent Halpern? Michael Stuhlbarg?
Yes, that's his name. He was mentioned in a Screen Junkies thing. I don't watch Screen Junkies that religiously, but
yeah, whatever.
They were talking about kind of they have their own sort of award show, like an Academy Awards, but it's a bit of a joke. And he won their "Oh, it's that guy" award, which is used to describe an actor who has appeared in a lot of films, but you don't know his name.
Yeah.
And yes, it is Michael Stolberg. One of the things about this film that's worth considering is that it's not an alien film, really.
No.
It is a sort of art film wrapped in this alien invasion story. If invasion's even the right word.
Okay. I mean, I didn't really think it was that much of an art film.
Okay.
But
well,
go on,
I want to talk
me.
about this. So, maybe this is just an association in my mind that made me think it was. Yeah, I don't know if art is the right. Well, it depends how you define an art film, but because obviously there's the extremes. But the beginning of the film really reminded me of this film called The Tree of Life, and The Tree of Life is one of the artier art films ever made. I think it's kind of about the meaning of life and nature versus humanity and all this sort of stuff. But the basic plot is it's kind of this guy thinking back on his childhood and his mother, and the relationship he had with his mother and the relationship he had with his father. And also, one of the things the film deals with is that one of the parents' children dies. And all during the first scene, I was just thinking of that film. And I guess you probably haven't seen it, The Tree of Life?
No, I haven't, no.
It's definitely an art film. Like, it has a scene where for about, it's heavily based on the Book of Job, and there's a scene, and it's 16 minutes, the film just stops and shows you the universe being created to the sound of classical music.
Oh, you showed me that. You showed me that last year.
Yeah, I did actually, didn't I?
Yeah.
I did show you that.
Yeah, I felt like I was, in Philadelphia. I felt like I was Denzel Washington and you were Tom Hanks. In that scene? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, you mean the scene where he's filmed the plastic bag, and he just thinks there's so much beauty in the world?
No. When Tom Hanks is playing classical music, and Denzel Washington's just there, like, I don't really know what's happening here.
One of the interesting things about this film I found watching it the second time is that when you watch that beginning scene, it kind of is just telling you its sort of point right off the bat. She's kind of just saying, I used to believe in beginnings and now I don't, and I just see things as they are all the time. And she's like saying all this stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, that's the point of the film, which I thought was kind of interesting. But one of the reasons why I sort of used the term, I don't know if art film is the right term, but I think people might say it's too full of itself with its grand themes. And I think the reality is that there's going to be a certain percentage of people who just attack any film that gets at all intelligent. But one of the things that I considered when I was watching this film is obviously one of the reasons we criticised Dunkirk is because we said, number one, not much happened. Number two, nobody said anything. And number three, I can't remember what number three was. I guess one question people might say is, what made this film because it did have a lot of similar elements in terms of, it was quite subdued. What made it better than Dunkirk?
Well, it had a plot.
It was better. Right? Yes.
I mean, that's a big thing.
The problem I had was that Dunkirk didn't have any themes. It had all this kind of silence and, people looking very pensive and serious, just like in Arrival. But the difference is the people in Arrival were pensive and serious about these things that were actually happening, these problems that were actually occurring, which was, there's an alien invasion, what are we going to do? And I think this was a very good vehicle for the themes it was presenting. If you want to make a film about language and about, how do we understand people, how does language affect the way we view reality, this, I think, was one of the best films you could have made to get that point across.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I kind of get what you mean on that sort of arty thing, because it's not a typical movie. But yeah, I just want to talk about. Well, I think it's just a very clever sci-fi movie. That's the way I looked at it. It's. A lot of obviously sci-fi movies involving aliens, especially, don't deal with aliens in a realistic way, and I think that's one of the things I wanted to talk about with this movie. Is it's very realistic in the sense that if aliens did land on planet Earth, I think and obviously in 12 different locations as it happened, I think this is the best depiction of what would happen. You have sort of the quiet panic almost when Amy Adams is walking to her car, and you remember that car crashing into another car in the car park. Yeah, that's kind of like how it would be. I think there would be like a bit of tension in the air for the normal people, I guess. I think it's very. Obviously we can't tell what an alien invasion would look like, But I think it'd probably be, this is the movie which is the closest to what it would actually be like.
Well, yeah, I think one of the problems with alien invasion films inherently is that I think there's a general idea in Western civilization, that, and I guess civilization as a whole, that intelligence tends to create a more sort of morally conscious group of people. And I think most people would agree that by the time human beings are traveling the stars and, you know, looking around space, we will not be at a point where we're going to blow up a bunch of people on the planet we find. And then obviously, you know, you think, when you see aliens in alien invasion films, you think, how can they be so technically advanced on one level, but so kind of blindly, barbarically violent on another level? And obviously, this film does a good job of avoiding that question by simply not making them violently barbaric. Because, you know, the inherent problem with films like War of the Worlds is it's like, oh, these people have mastered interstellar travel, but they're just brutes.
Basically, I thought also how the world reacted. How, I don't know, it's never seemed to occur to me, like, how would different countries react if there was an alien invasion. I mean, you've seen Independence Day, obviously, and all the countries, I think, kind of band together, from what I remember. I don't know, I haven't seen that movie in ages, but I don't think there's like a disagreement. You know, all of humanity comes together. That is not the case, obviously, in this movie. That's the central, like, issue that people have to get over. And
it's just like Watchmen. In Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan goes to New York, and there's a bit of trickery and stuff involved, but he goes to New York and he blows up New York during the Cold War, and his actions cause all of humanity to unite against superheroes. And that's the point of the film.
Well, are you saying that some countries would be happy if New York was blown up?
Yeah, well, I'm saying, like, people would react to it as like, okay, we have a common enemy. I mean, I think people would be happy, but I also think they'd be like, you know, let's realize that, you know, one minute it's New York being blown up, next minute it could be Moscow. I think aliens should, in theory, be a very uniting feature. I think what makes them so divisive in this film is that they don't present a clear antagonistic force, which means that, you know, obviously no one wants to attack them, because you wouldn't, you know, you don't want to be the person who starts a fight with a bunch of aliens who are capable of interstellar travel, and yet at the same time no one wants to trust them, because you don't want to you know, become part of their evil colonialist machinations.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a very big word.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the anxiety that this film deals with.
Yeah. I just wanted to talk about the aliens as well.
Yes.
I mean, they're called heptapods. They have 7 legs, I guess. And yeah, they don't speak. Or they don't use noise to communicate. They use signs from their legs.
Like the film Signs.
Yeah, exactly like that. Yeah, and I thought, again, I think that is, I don't know, it's just kind of genius. Like, whoever thought of that. They don't communicate with noise. Instead, it's this different, you know, symbols. That's how they manage to communicate. And yeah, I think that right there is something that, again,
very clever.
Kind of opens your mind, broadens your mind. Very clever.
I wanted to touch on that because in the first episode we did way back then, I mentioned linguistics, if you remember, in the context of explaining how it is that, for example, you can understand a language but not understand the linguistics of that language and things like that. And I've always had a really active interest in linguistics. I think, I guess I'll just say is I'm a Lord of the Rings fanboy, and one of the things about Lord of the Rings is that Tolkien was a linguist, and he created these languages and invented all these sort of new features and things like that. And I've always, you know, an interest in that kind of area. was expecting, actually, going into this podcast, that I would have a more... Well, I was expecting I would like the film more, and I think we probably like the film equally. But I also have a kind of subjective interest in this film in particular, because I do find that subject of, how diverse the potential is for how we think about the world and how we express these concepts.
But I kind of wish the aliens wore clothes. And I don't know how they would wear clothes, but here's the thing. When you think of an alien, they're always like naked. They always have no clothes on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if these aliens, for some reason, had something on them, like covering them.
Yeah.
Like I think of the stereotypical like Martian. He's just naked, like in grey, and he's got a big head.
You're saying would have defied some stereotypes.
Yeah, defies some stereotypes, exactly. And they all look the same. Like you can't tell the heptapods apart.
Yeah, I'm tired of the objectification of aliens.
Why can't they look different?
I'm thinking we're probably not going to run over time with this, so I'm just going to tell you about my plan for a remake of War of the Worlds. It's War of the Worlds.
Go for it.
But from the aliens' perspective, and also, I don't know if you know this, but obviously War of the Worlds is a very old book because it was famously read by Wells in the 30s.
I do know that.
And it was written in the late 19th century. And the original plot was aliens land near Surrey, or in Surrey, to take out the English Empire, or the British Empire, because the British Empire at the time was the world's largest empire. So they went after, the superpower of the time. Now, one of the things I'd love to make is a War of the Worlds where it's from the aliens' perspective, and it's kind of like... because the world of the 1800s was not a good world. It was a world where there were dictatorships, and it's a world where there was a huge amount of racism and sexism and all these things, and you could easily imagine an alien force being like, we want to... Obviously they want resources, but it's kind of like, we're doing these humans a favor, because these humans, they're violent and they're uncivilized, and they're eons behind us in terms of society. It's kind of like the way we view Iraq and Afghanistan and places like that, and we say, we're doing them a favor.
Traditionally Africa.
Yes. And obviously, and actually, here's my twist for it at the end, my super duper twist, and you're going to love this one. So it keeps the ending of the aliens. They come to the UK and they have this big fight, and obviously they're winning, but then they get defeated by germs. That's the classic War of the Worlds ending. They get an infection, it kills them. The twist at the end is that the British Empire discovers or harnesses this alien technology, and they think, this alien technology is really destructive. We have to use it before our enemies use it. And the film basically ends with human beings invading each other with this alien technology, because they're they're making preemptive strikes against their potential enemies. And that was my fantastic idea, I have to say, for a remake of War of the Worlds. I thought would really
inspirational.
Some conventions.
Okay, fair enough. Are we going to move on?
The one thing that I found interesting, and this is kind of to do with the characters, and I guess I would possibly like to touch on this point a bit, but I don't think there's very much to say about it. I really liked the chemistry between Jeremy Renner and Lois Lane.
Yeah, Lois Lane. No, yeah, so did I. Amy Adams was really good in this.
I don't think there's much to say about that. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is obviously there's this idea in this film, I guess I've said this several times now, about is how language affects the way we view the world and how we have these different ideas. And one of the things that I noticed early on was that, well, first of all, this is a complete, not too much to say about this. When they get to the compound, their mobile phones are taken away from them. And then there's this whole thing about, they're going dark, they're not talking to anyone. The film ends with her getting a satellite phone and running around, and the whole thing is kind of about communication. And one of the constant things throughout the film is they're not communicating. Their means of communicating are being stifled, which I thought was kind of just a clever sort of meta theme because the main theme is about and
Yeah.
on top of that there's this idea of they can't talk to each other. But that's not what I wanted to say. What I wanted to talk about was they're in this helicopter, and
Yeah.
he kind of says, oh, linguistics isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is science. And then he sort of says, we should give them the Fibonacci sequence. And there's this idea that actually occurs in sort of, I don't know, there's a word for the study of extraterrestrial life, but there's this idea in kind of extraterrestrial finding where people assume that the one objective thing that we all have is mathematics. So I don't know if you know, but I think it's in England. There is a satellite, or I don't know what it's called when a satellite's on the ground. There's a radar, a solar dish, something. A satellite dish, that's the word. There's a satellite dish,
Yes,
and it puts off a sequence of prime numbers into space. And the idea is, or the hope is, that if at one point that eventually reaches intelligent life, they will see that radiation, or whatever it's kind of communicated in, and they will be able to pick up that it is prime numbers, and they'll go, oh, this is mathematics, and we can recognize that this mathematics is coming from an intelligent life. And that's kind of this thing that actually occurs, and I find it kind of interesting.
Yeah.
There's this idea in this film that science and linguistics, the science being represented by Jeremy Renner and the linguistics being represented by Amy Adams, are almost two contradictory languages. One of them is, sort of this harsh approach where you just show these numbers and you just say, and there's objectivity and everything is kind of clear, cut and objective. And then there's this other approach where it's harder, because you can't just say, here are some prime numbers, blah, 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 you have to say, what does this mean to you? What does, this symbolize? And, a lot of people who are really into science have this anxiety about linguistics because it's so subjective, because there aren't right answers.
Well, yeah, I just want to say you clearly took a lot more from this movie than I did, and certainly on the linguistic front.
Yes.
Because, I did not consider this at all, the comparison between mathematics and language. That is not something that had occurred to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, well done. I like that.
I have one more thing to say about
Okay,
language. It's not really about language. I did think it was very kind of clever how they dealt with sort of brushing over these presumably months of research. Jeremy Renner basically his name's Ian in the film, explains kind of what they've learned so far. It's kind of just this voiceover, and he says, this is what we've learned, and he explains all this stuff. And I thought that was very good, because when after the first session, where it takes them ages to just communicate the word human, I'm like, hold on a minute, how long is this film going to be? Is it just going to be them learning a language? But they did a good job at covering. I thought it was very good.
Well, yeah, Jeremy Renner does a bit of Ian, does a bit of narration in the middle of the movie, which kind of comes out of nowhere. But obviously that's to, kind of cover the months that have been progressing in the movie's, actual time. To make sure, we're all caught up and we know what's going on.
In fact, actually, just on that point, I think the fact that this film has so many sort of competing perspectives and ideas and situations is very good in terms of expository dialogue. Because if it was just a group filled with linguists, then the expository dialogue would feel forced, because it's like they're just telling each other
what they already know.
Yeah. But because it's there's all these different groups, each one is having to explain to each other and therefore the audience what is happening.
I just want to say on the language front, obviously in the movie, there's the idea is if you can understand the language, then you can see your future and your past, And so I was just wondering, obviously you see this flash forward, I guess, to when Amy Adams is teaching, this language, the universal language, she calls it in her book.
Mm-hmm.
And she's giving a lecture in a lecture hall. And I'm just wondering, if she can see her future, and if she's teaching it to all the other students, will they all be able to see their future, and therefore will a load of people in Earth, in this universe, be able to, work out what's going to happen in their lives? Is that going to be something that, is going to be? I guess that was the whole point of the aliens coming down to Earth. They wanted to give humanity this technology that allows you to see everything. But yeah, I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, I have some things to bring up. I think, first of all, before I say anything on that, I just want to kind of talk about how, with regards to the time stuff, this film is almost kind of, there's a plot within a plot that is itself larger than the plot, which is you basically have this entire woman's life being, well, not entire woman's life, but a huge part of this woman's life being told to you through this medium of her flash forwards and flash backwards. And I just wanted to kind of summarize what happens, and partially because I want to make sure that I think I'm right about what happens, and you can correct me on this. So as far as this is my timeline as I wrote it down. So she sees the aliens, obviously, and she learns how to see all of time. And then in doing that, she meets Jeremy Renner. Then they have a kid, and she knows the kid is going to die, and she tells Jeremy Renner. Now, one of the things she says to her daughter in a flash forward is that her husband, aka the daughter's dad, said that she made the wrong choice. Now, my interpretation of that, I think, and this is my understanding, this is kind of, I guess you can't really know, but I was left to infer that what this basically meant is she told Jeremy Renner that the daughter was going to have cancer, and then Jeremy Renner claiming that she made the wrong choice, possibly, I think, meant that Jeremy Renner was saying it was wrong of you to even have this child, knowing that
yes,
you were going to have cancer. And then, of course,
I agree. Yeah,
presumably the emotional devastation of this kind of whole thing leads to Jeremy Renner breaking up with her, and then at some point, presumably when her kid is either late teenage or early 20s, it looked, I would say late teenage, if I was to guess.
Yeah.
Because you see a shot of her, with bald hair, presumably from chemo, so I guess that's why we assume it's cancer, and she is dead. And there's an element of this film that is inherently circular, which works with the way sort of the language and the idea of time works, because of course you start the film and you think the beginning of the film or the setup for her sort of, because obviously, I assume when you watch it, you, like I thought, that when you watched all this stuff happen at the beginning, you were watching her past, and that was sort of something she was going to have with her. And then, of course, as the film goes on, eventually you work out, wait, no, she's not looking at the past, she's looking at the future. And then the film ends with us pretty much back where we started, with, Jeremy Renner saying, oh, do you want to have a baby? And in that sense, it's kind of neat that this film about this circular language and this non-linear understanding of time itself is encased within this little circular story.
Yes. Everything's tied up in a nice little package. Or a neat little package. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One that obviously you were talking about the implication of everyone having this ability,
yeah.
And I just kind of
the actual implications. Yeah.
Yes. And I think it's an interesting thing to me. There's something bittersweet about this film. In fact, I have to compare this film now, because we've mentioned American Beauty, and I did briefly mention this. I have to.
Well, we didn't really mention it, but yes,
we saw. We have to talk about A Serious Man. And the reason we have to talk about A Serious Man is because A Serious Man has two things that are kind of similar in it. Number one, A Serious Man is heavily about language, and there are several moments in the film where it kind of, you can see elements of like the son in A Serious Man is studying Hebrew for his bar mitzvah, and there is this whole thing about how he doesn't actually learn Hebrew, he just learns the recordings. So he learns to imitate the sounds, and it's like that
reminds me of my Science GCSE. Like I just didn't know what actually. I just remember what I had to write down and I wrote it down. But yeah, go on.
Well, the embarrassing is, for this podcast, I have to just learn the sounds of someone discussing Arrival. I don't actually speak English.
Yeah. How meta.
But yes. So A Serious Man, the point of A Serious Man is basically about how kind of the incomprehensibility of human interpretation is the point. And one of the things about A Serious Man is it's very cynical, because the ending is, of course, he finds out, presumably, that he's got cancer, which is convenient. But the way the film deals with it is simultaneously very cynical, but also indifferent. It's kind of just, life sucks, which is obviously a very different message to this film. Because this film is depressing, I think, in that this film actually did make me feel feelings, which is something that I do give the film a lot of credit for. I really did feel emotions when I was watching this film. But this film, it's also kind of bittersweet in a weird way, where it's like, I struggled with accepting the reality, because obviously the point is she decides that she is just happy with life as it is, and she's okay with death and the inevitability of it, and she just wants a child so that she can enjoy life with it. And it's kind of presented as really happy, and it's kind of like bittersweet is probably the perfect word for it. It's like, yes, it's sort of happy, but at the same time it's also very intensely miserable.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, obviously at the end, I guess this is kind of a nitpick. We'll talk about the end of the movie when General Zhang.
I have pretty much one last question I've got noted down, and it's returning back to, which I don't think I've still entirely answered, your point of what are the real world implications of this film. One of the things I was thinking is, would I want this ability? Because
that is the central moral question, isn't it? Would you?
I think I need a linear understanding of time, so I can be like, okay, I'm here now, and there are a lot of problems in my life that are XYZ number of years away, and I can just ignore them. And it's kind of, I'll tell you one of the weirdest moments where I got sad, and it's, again, I have a habit of mentioning certain things and then bringing them up again, because I mentioned when we were talking about Dunkirk, I mentioned The Legend of Korra. The Legend of Korra is the sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I guess you've heard of Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Yeah, because it's laughably bad. Yeah.
But the anime is good, generally, is possibly, many will regard that as an understatement, but it's also the only, well, I was going to say it's the only anime I've watched. A lot of people will say that it isn't an anime because it was animated in America. I'm not even going to go into that. But the point is, Avatar: The Last Airbender is about this 12-year-old kid, and Avatar: The Legend of Korra is about his successor. And the introduction to the show every single time is this kind of explanation of how Avatar, the original Avatar, Aang, who is the main character in Avatar: The Last Airbender, is dead, and we're dealing with his successor. And every single time I watch that introduction, I don't like Avatar: The Legend of Korra, for the record, but every single time I watch that introduction, I'd always feel a bit sad, because I'd be like, basically we've spent 60 episodes with this kid who's 12 years old, and then in the sequel we get reminded at the beginning of every single episode that he's dead. And it's not as if when he was 12, he died when he was 70, but because you only see him when he's 12, and the next time he's mentioned it's just like, oh, he's dead now, it just makes me feel really depressed. And I always just kind of think, like, if I knew when I was young that I was going to die, even if it was hundreds of years from me, tens of years from now, it's just like having that knowledge in your head, like, why would you want to know when you're going to die? And it just seems like the type of information I would just hate to learn.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not sure I would like to know either. I mean, I'm wondering if you could change it. Like, Jeremy Renner says it's a choice.
Yes, I think it is that question of, would you change it? And then that creates the question of, like, surely everyone would just be living completely perfect lives. Like, for example, if I knew when I was, and this is something I was also thinking about, say that I could go back to when I was 18, and I'll just pick that as a time, and I could say, everything that's going to happen in my life, I would think, knowing what was going to happen in my life when I was 18 would completely change the way I behaved in just so many ways. Like there's so much that has changed between, you know, when I was that sort of age and now, and I just think like I would know so much that would just change the way I would behave, and it would end up changing the future and the past and all that stuff. So yeah, I don't really know if the film has an internal explanation for how people can know the future and then how there can ever be anything wrong in that universe, because I would think, you know, you just keep changing it until you come up with a good system.
Well, can we talk about General Zhang
Yes,
now?
because I've got nothing more to say.
Okay. Well, yeah, we spent a lot of time on the language thing, which I guess is the whole point of the movie, the central thing. So yeah, I guess it makes sense. But yeah, I just had I don't know if you had a bit of a problem with him knowing what Amy Adams had to see. I mean, I'm not sure if he should know that the character, what she called Louise. How does he know that Louise needs to see his phone number and hear what his dying man had to say? You know what it reminds
me of? It reminds me of at the end of the Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry casts a Patronus and he's like, I knew I could do it because I'd already done it. He's like, yes, you know, in the Prisoner of Azkaban. And I really just thought, and he's like, does that make sense? And Hermione's like, no. And it's kind of like, that's how I felt about sort of, it's like, oh, you know that you can save the planet because you've already done it. And it's like, okay, well, you know, to be honest, what I would do, to test it, I'd give her a fake phone number if I was General Zhang, and I'd be like, oh, let's see you use your powers now.
I think that could have been better if Louise asked for the General's number and asked what she said to him.
Yes.
Because then it would be like, okay, she understands her, like, what she can do, and of course the General doesn't have an understanding. And if it happened that way, I think that would have been better.
I think if someone called me up and told me my wife's dying words on my number that she shouldn't by rights have, and then 18 months later I met her, I would not immediately think, hey, I better show her my number and tell her my wife's dying words. I would think, hey, this person knows my number. And if she then said, I don't know your number, I'd be like, huh, idiot. And I'd be like, stupid woman. And walk away.
Well, it's kind of convenient. His wife's dying words had something to do with the war. The phrase that his wife used, by the way, I looked it up, is there's no winners in war, only widows. That's the phrase, which I think is kind of convenient for the plot.
I think, yes, that's a very good point about General Zhang. I feel like I just said General Zhang. Very good point about General Zhang.
General Zhang. Yeah, I put Chinese bad guy, like I said before, because I didn't actually know. I forgot his name, but yeah. Well, it turns out he is redeemed at the end, so maybe he's not Chinese bad guy.
Yeah, maybe
General Chinese.
Maybe he's not Chinese, because all Chinese people are bad guys. So maybe he's maybe he was.
There you go.
Yes. Oh, actually, you know what? Nowadays, of course, I guess Chinese people have got to be good guys because of the markets. Because, you know, Chinese people are making. So I'm kind of surprised. It's kind of brave of them to show. They should have been like, oh, look, the glorious Chinese government has that. I bet there's an alternative ending in China where it's like it turns out the aliens were bad, and then the Americans are just there, kind of on fire, going, "Why didn't we listen to the Chinese?" Speaking of alternative endings, obviously you watched the Get Out Honest trailer, and you pointed out some stuff, but one of the things that I found interesting is that they mentioned in that Honest trailer that there was an alternative ending to Get Out, and I haven't seen this alternative ending yet, but they showed clear footage of Chris is his name, in an orange jumpsuit with his friend there, and they had that in the honest trailer. I don't know if you missed it.
No, I saw that. Yeah.
So there's, and I was not aware of the existence of that alternative
No, neither
ending.
was
Yeah, and I think I might have to watch it. It sounds very depressing, but
Yeah. Well, if that happens, then there's
Yes.
probably no sequel. So, yeah, right.
yes,
Right.
Although I think alternative ending, they could do a Prison Break sequel, or they could do Harold and Kumar in Guantanamo Bay. And one more thing on the subject of returning to films we have reviewed previously. By the way, I'm assuming we're basically done talking about this film now.
Yeah. Well, obviously we've got we've got the summary to go, but that's it. Yeah.
So just one more thing as a kind of little, we don't have to just talk about Arrival. We can even talk about A Serious Man and hypothetical remakes of War of the Worlds. So I want to talk about, obviously the Oscar nominations came out. Were you excited to see Dunkirk nominated for 1,000 Oscars?
Yeah. Ahead of, the technical awards. Yeah, it deserves to be on the shortlist. Yeah, but obviously, yeah, it was going to get nominated. I knew it was going to get nominated for Best Picture. Obviously it was, but it won't win. Yeah, it's either going to be Lady Bird or Three Billboards or Get Out.
Final thoughts on Arrival?
Again, like I said at the beginning, very good movie. I think it really broadens the mind. And to be honest, I think when you view it for the first time, that's the best. And the second time, you get used to it more, but it's not the same as viewing it for the first time. It's kind of like the characters as they enter the alien ship. The first time it's like whoa. Second time, obviously they get used to it, and I think it's so impactful. The mix of tension and the curiosity when it comes to the aliens. And obviously the overall philosophical questions that make you think. Really well done, smart sci-fi movie. Yeah, and I don't know. Like after you watch it, you can't. I can't really describe the feeling, but it's kind of like being high. I don't know how else to put it. But it's like you think, well, like whoa, like because obviously you're thinking about all the themes that the movie presents. But yeah, so that's what I'd say.
I concur.
Well, that's great.
I do agree. I think you putting it as being high is probably a relatively accurate point, because it is kind of like, especially on the emotional level, I think this film definitely does leave you thinking about the frailty of human life and the shortness of our time on this earth and all that stuff, and you will definitely have a mini existential crisis, but I hope a welcome one that you will come out the other end of stronger and better.
Yes.
Do you want to give it a rating?
You know what, Michael? I will give it a rating. I'm going to say 9 out of 10.
Yeah, and I encounter the exciting moment of one of my my system of doing it, which is rating every film relative to each other, and I think this film is definitely better than Dunkirk. But I have a question. Do I think this film is better than Get Out? And
well, I rated it the same.
Tentative, yes, I know, and obviously I would also put them very close. I think tentatively, yes, this film is better than Get Out, and I think obviously Get Out is a very entertaining film, but I do think this film will stay with me longer than Get Out, and I think, as much as I really did enjoy Get Out, and obviously, I rate them the same, I think this film just comes out slightly on top because I think it goes a little grander, a little more accessible, and something that's probably going to be a lot more universal for the human experience.
Yeah, if I had to pick, I'd say Get Out is better, and I think that's probably because of the rewatchability factor.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, you can watch, I think, Get Out a numerous amount of times, and still like it or enjoy it as much as maybe the first time you watched it, perhaps even more. But with this movie, like I said before, the first time, it's downhill from there after seeing it for the first time.
I think this film for me, it held up quite a bit on the second time. But yes, I do think.
Oh yeah, definitely held up. But yeah, I'm just saying it's not as great
Yeah.
as seeing it for the first viewing.
But it definitely has a very impactful first viewing. I think the problem is when you watch it the second time, you're just thinking about the first time you watched it. Definitely.
Yeah. I found myself doing that. That is right. Yeah.
Just thinking about every single thing. Oh, I remember how incredible it was the first time. So yes, but overall very good film. And let's wrap up now. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for watching Select and Reflect. This was our review of Arrival.
And join us next time where we'll be reviewing Zootopia.
Yes, Zootopia.
The winner of the Best Animated Picture. So, bye-bye.
What a great way to end.